Imagine standing on a narrow strip of dirt in central Gaul. Behind you, 80,000 starving warriors are trapped on a hilltop. In front of you, a relief army of 250,000 men is marching toward your position. You are trapped between them. To understand how Julius Caesar ended up sandwiched between two massive forces in 52 BCE, we have to look at the 6 years prior. Caesar had been relentlessly campaigning across Gaul, forcing tribes into submission and burning villages. The tribes had rebelled before, but they lacked coordination until a politically sharp Arverian nobleman named Vercingetorix stepped onto the stage. Vercingetorix understood that meeting disciplined Roman legions in open battle was a death sentence. Instead, he deployed a scorched earth strategy. He ordered the Gallic tribes to torch their own crops, destroy their own villages, and deny the Romans any source of food or shelter. By starving Caesar's supply lines, he stopped the Roman momentum cold. Then came Gergovia. Caesar ordered an assault on Vercingetorix's fortified hilltop town, and the Romans pushed too far up the slopes without proper support. They were cut off and driven back. Nearly 700 legionaries died, including 46 veteran centurions. Losing that many experienced junior officers in a single afternoon devastated the Roman chain of command. Word spread across the region fast. The Roman general, who had seemed entirely untouchable for 6 straight years, had finally been beaten. Tribes that had allied with Rome for years suddenly switched sides. What began as a scattered local rebellion quickly consolidated into a unified existential threat to Caesar's entire campaign. Caesar eventually cornered Vercingetorix at Alesia, a hilltop fortress rising 150 meters above the surrounding plains. It was a fiercely strong defensive position. Vercingetorix retreated to the plateau with roughly 80,000 men and sent messengers racing to every corner of Gaul to summon a massive relief army. His plan was simple: wait for reinforcements, then crush the Romans between the two forces. Caesar looked at the terrain and did the math. Retreating meant losing Gaul completely and effectively ending his political career. But staying meant facing 250,000 warriors in a two-front, open-field battle. Any rational commander would have withdrawn to safer ground. Caesar did not retreat. Instead, he ordered his engineers to start digging. He survived because a Roman legionary was a highly trained combat engineer who carried entrenching tools directly alongside his weapons. They could build a fortified camp from scratch in an afternoon, and Caesar was about to demand they build something entirely unique in the ancient world. This diagram outlines Caesar's first massive construction over the next 3 weeks, the circumvallation. It was an 18-kilometer continuous ring of fortifications, completely encircling the hill of Alesia. In cross-section, you can see the defensive layers. The men dug 2 massive trenches, filling the inner one with water diverted from nearby rivers. Behind that, they piled the excavated dirt into a 4-meter-high rampart topped with a wooden palisade, with observation watchtowers rising every 24 meters along the entire circuit. In front of those trenches, engineers planted rows of hidden, sharpened branches inside staggered pits, nicknamed lilies. They also hammered iron-barbed hooks into buried logs to rip apart feet and hooves. They built a mechanical kill zone designed to make any downhill charge suicidal. But then Caesar got word that the massive Gallic relief army was actually coming, so he ordered a second ring of fortifications built, this one facing outward. The contravallation spanned roughly 21 kilometers, using the exact same trenches, stakes, and watchtowers, trapping the Romans inside a corridor of their own making. When they put down their shovels, Caesar's roughly 60,000 men had constructed almost 40 kilometers of continuous defensive walls, entirely surrounded by hostile territory. Caesar understood a basic principle of siege warfare: walls multiply your forces. A smaller defending army can hold off a massive force by funneling the attackers into concentrated kill zones. He had built himself a fortress inside a fortress. Inside Alesia, the strategy was unspooling. Vercingetorix had 80,000 mouths to feed, and the Gauls had never planned for a protracted siege. As days turned into weeks, the granaries emptied. Warriors started rationing mere handfuls of grain, and horses were slaughtered for meat. Desperate, Vercingetorix pushed the town's civilian population out through his gates, hoping the Romans would let the women and children pass. Caesar refused. He left the civilians stranded in the cold no-man's land between the two armies. The sight of their own people starving right outside the walls put immense psychological pressure on the Gallic defenders. Eventually, the relief army arrived. The first major assault hit the Romans at night. Vercingetorix launched a breakout attempt from the hilltop, while the relief force crashed into the outer walls simultaneously. Roman soldiers scrambled between positions in total darkness, trying to plug gaps in both lines, while arrows and javelins rained down from two different directions. The Romans held the line. The centurions kept their men disciplined through the absolute certainty that if those walls fell, every single Roman inside that narrow corridor would die. The Gauls pulled back, but they had identified a weak point. On the northern side of the Roman fortifications, a hill made the defensive ring impossible to complete, stopping at a camp manned by just 2 legions. 60,000 Gallic warriors hit this specific gap from the outside, while Vercingetorix launched another breakout attempt from the inside. Caesar rode directly along the inner walls, wearing his distinctive red cloak, so his men could spot him in the chaos. He pulled men from quiet sections of the wall and personally led fresh cohorts into the fight, while ordering his best general, Titus Labienus, to hold the northern gap at all costs. As the northern gap reached its breaking point, Caesar committed his last reserve, the massive elite Germanic horsemen he had kept hidden behind the fortifications. He ordered them to ride completely around the outer wall and strike the Gallic rear. While the Gauls poured their focus into breaking the Roman camp, Caesar's cavalry thundered out of the open fields and smashed directly into their rear. The massive relief force suddenly realized they were caught in the exact same trap they had tried to spring on the Romans. Caught between the defensive walls and the heavy cavalry, the Gallic assault collapsed into a total panic, and the relief army dissolved into the countryside. Watching his only hope disintegrate from the hilltop, Vercingetorix knew the siege was over. The next day, he rode out of the gates, dismounted, and threw his weapons at Caesar's feet. Organized Gallic resistance against Rome was permanently broken. The events of Alesia sound like Roman propaganda, but modern archaeologists excavating the site in Burgundy have found the physical evidence. The specific trenches, the post holes for the watchtowers, the lily pits, and the iron hooks match Caesar's written accounts perfectly. He really did build a 40-kilometer double fortress in hostile territory. The victory made Caesar fabulously wealthy. He looted enough gold and silver to crash the precious metals market in Rome, securing an incredibly loyal veteran army of 10 legions. 3 years later, he would take that exact army, cross the Rubicon River, and march on Rome to dissolve the Republic. Alesia is still studied in military academies today because it illustrates a cold, mechanical truth of warfare. Outnumbered 5-1 and cut off from supplies, Caesar secured a definitive victory through absolute discipline, brutal engineering, and the sheer audacity to dig in when everyone else would have run.